Hi, everyone. I'm Desiree Steele. I'm the program manager for MDIC under the Case for Quality Collaborative Community. MakeCAPACool is very near and dear to me, not just because I worked on the initiative. We have Steve Silverman, who is going to be our keynote speaker, and then we'll have Catherine Merrill, working group extraordinaire from Medtronic, give an overview of the MakeCAPACool framework.
You all able to hear me? That work? No?
That's better.
Now?
Now
Things are better. Okay, good. I'm glad. And I'm going to stand up because it gives people a chance to use the joke. You should stand up, and then I say I am standing up. So it's hilarious. It never gets old. So I am Steve Silverman. Excuse me. I'm Steve Silverman with the Silverman Group. And apologies, I'm chicken, so I have to have some printed words in front of me, but I'll try not to just stare at paper. I am president of the Silverman Group, and I've done a number of things in the medtech space, and rather than bore you with details, I'll just mention that I spent about 13 years at FDA, and when I was there, I had the good luck to help develop and launch the Case for Quality initiative. And so I'm not going to repeat all of the great comments that were made in the last session by speakers like Cisco and others, but yeah, I mean, the feeling of connection and accomplishment over time is really profound. And the things that we've seen are just fantastic. What's really, really exciting for me is that there has been, I think, much more success in recent years in terms of developing programs that really have the opportunity to provide tangible impact and benefit for industry members, FDA, and ultimately patients, because obviously they are everybody's first priority. And that's really what's fantastic about MakeCAPACool. And I'm the furthest thing from an expert about it. You'll hear from Catherine, who easily runs circles around me in terms of how the initiative works. So I'll keep my comments at a very general level. That's kind of my sweet spot. What I will say, though, is the initiative is really distinctive, as you will learn and as we'll hear more during the panel, in that it provides something meaningful to respond to industry needs, which is to say, we all have an understanding, right, of, what CAPA is. Bad page turning. So we all have an understanding of what CAPA is, right, and what it's designed to do. So we all know, you're all regulatory experts, right, and you know that CAPA is designed to collect and analyze data about issues that usually deviate, activities within a facility that deviate from what is expected and anticipated, and then an opportunity to investigate both product and quality problems so that we can produce a corrective and preventive action. The question, though, is how to actually do all of this effectively in a way that responds to regular concern and sometimes confusion by industry members, and I think continuously frustrates regulators. And so what's the basis for my comments? And I think that we'll begin with FDA. So if you take a look at how FDA regulates CAPA, right, it's evaluated in every inspection that FDA conducts when it's trying to determine the overall compliance of device makers, right? Every device facility oversight inspection includes an evaluation of the facility's CAPA capability. And as you all know better than I, oftentimes things go wrong, right? There is confusion about what proper CAPA execution means, and it results in things like 483 observations, warning letters, notwithstanding the fact that I doubt that there is a medical device maker here or anybody who is joining us online who wants to do anything other than meet regulatory requirements, satisfy FDA and other regulators, and serve patient safety, right? The intent, the objective is clear, and it's a shared objective. Yet, what we see is that excuse me, in inspection after inspection after inspection, there is FDA and regulator concern about whether or not CAPA activities are executed in a manner that satisfies regulator expectations. At the same time, I think that this is absolutely a shared pain point, right? So industry also struggles to understand what are regulator expectations and how industry members can organize their CAPA activity in a way that demonstrates to regulators that they understand those expectations and they're able to meet them. Now, if you ask, like, where are these perspectives coming from? Where is the proof? Well, for me, if you talk about regulators, the answer comes in part from my experience at FDA and then in part from just the basic inspection data that's available publicly and substantiates my point about regulators continuously finding problems with firms' CAPA operations. But even if you look at CAPA from an industry perspective and simply go online, a simple Google search, right, yields results like, let's stop confusing everyone with CAPA. That's a course that's available for people who want to learn more about CAPA. Here are some more. CAPA overload and other perils to avoid. And the third one is the CAPA conundrum, right? So collectively, these titles, which all represent courses that are being offered to industry members to help them understand and meet regulator expectations around CAPA, are sending the message that there's real confusion about what exactly members are supposed to be doing. And that, if that is correct, right, that's extraordinary pain. Right? I mean, you all understand the cost implications in terms of meeting regulator expectations around CAPA. You understand the cost implications, both in terms of the cost of remediation and the reputational damage that occurs when there are 483 findings, let alone warning letters or untitled letters. And so this is a big deal. And as you'll learn, the solution that Catherine and her teammates and others have developed is a really elegant and efficient approach to make what was previously unknown and confusing now better understood and actionable. That said, everything that I've communicated up to this point is a perspective. It's my educated judgment about what's going on in the quality space when it comes to CAPA. And what I want to do for just a few minutes is ask you all to share your own perspective. So I really want to just flip the script and ask you to share your comments. Advise me whether or not the perspectives about the problems in terms of understanding regulator expectations and meeting those expectations related to CAPA sound right, or there are other things that people need to be paying attention to. So it's an open forum, and I hope people will raise their hands and get up and make comments. Please introduce yourself also.
Rather like Victor with Siemens software.
Sorry, there's a microphone at your back.
I've been with industry for 20 years in quality. So the other perspective is there's a real business process cost to CAPA and the backlog of CAPAs that comes in and how many resources have to be associated with those CAPAs. And generally, what it leads to is this huge backlog.
Right.
I mean, I don't think I've ever spoken with a company who said, oh, no, we don't have a backlog of CAPAs. They run right through our system. So I think in addition to patients and regulators, there's the business that you're responsible for.
Right. Who else would like to weigh in? Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Pat Schaefer with FTI, and as a consultant, I see hundreds of different organizations, and the big issue that I see is what's the threshold for a CAPA? Forget about the process. There are effective ways of executing or running the process, but I've gone in and see companies that have 2 open CAPAs over an entire year, and others where a similar sized company might have 200. So
Right.
what qualifies as a CAPA, or how do you know when to initiate a CAPA?
Right. So I mean, what I'm hearing is there's two issues. One, the one that you've mentioned, Pat, is the threshold, right? How do companies confidently know that their decision-making process about when a CAPA is required is robust, right? And then also, to your point, how do companies manage CAPAs efficiently so that there is a reduction in backlogs, and also the process is made more straightforward and efficient. So I think that those are entirely valid points. Can I ask if anybody else would like to share their perspective? Oh, yes, hello.
I would. Hello. So I teach a course in a master's program on CAPA. And one of the things we start out with is the confusion around the word CAPA.
Right.
CAPA is a CAPA system. CAPA is corrective and preventive action. CAPA is an investigation. So just really understanding when we say CAPA, what does it mean? Because just that CAPA means so many things to so many people that sometimes I feel like taking a step back and understanding within whatever system that you're in, what you're talking about.
Right, right. I think that's a very, very good point, is that in addition to everything else, right, there is a basic lack of consensus about what CAPA means. And it relates to some of the points that we talked about a moment ago, which is to say, who's doing it right? Is the firm that says, no, we only had 3 CAPAs last year, we were fine, are they correct? Or are they grossly missing situations that require CAPAs? Or is the firm that says, oh no, we did 150 CAPAs last year, and we are at 25 of 150, are they right, but struggling with the process, okay? So I want to pivot, right? I don't really want to talk further about what the problem is, because it's boring, right? You all know what the problem is, and everybody agrees that the problem exists. What we're going to talk about in this session is the solution. And you'll hear more from Catherine and others. Ravi, did you want to contribute?
Steve, so I'm Ravi Nabar. I chair the CFQ Circle. And my perspective, I want to bring a perspective that is actually, I'd like us to think more about PACA than about CAPA. Because we want to solve problems before they actually come up, as opposed to correcting them after they come up. So just a perspective. I know there's a lot of thought gone behind that in many segments, but how do we get from CAPA to PACA?
I think that's great. At some point, then we'll also talk about alpaca, because honestly, they're delightful sweaters. So soft and luxurious. Okay, so a couple more quick points. You got it, right? You have a real sense that this is a comprehensive problem, that everybody has very legitimate things to say in describing the problem. So one other important point that I want to make, and then I'll try to wrap up my comments, is what do I mean by regulators? And this is an important point also. We are not just talking about FDA, right? You all know this, right? Any company who's here, I would put money on, has to deal with multiple regulators. FDA, European regulators, Asian regulators, et cetera. And so whether you are talking about the current quality system regulation that FDA enforces, or you're talking about ISO 13485, which is a standard that also relates to quality, you're dealing with basically the same responsibility and trying to satisfy regulators simultaneously. So this is not just an FDA thing. This is a worldwide thing. That being said, we'll hear about how this initiative has been tested with regulators inside and outside of the United States who said, yes, this makes sense, this works, and critically, it doesn't require new regulations. This works with the status quo, and it gets us to effective satisfaction of regulator responsibilities through currently available expectations and methodologies for meeting regulatory requirements. And that is massively powerful. And I think really the difference between action and talk, right? We have something that can be in place tomorrow that we know will satisfy regulators. So last point, and then I'll sit down. What do I mean by Rosetta Stone? It's simple. I was having a conversation previously with colleagues, and we were talking about this fantastic initiative, and I just said essentially, oh, this is the Rosetta Stone. And by that, I simply mean it is a tool that makes the previously unknown known, right? It takes what was this area of massive confusion and makes that area more clear using a framework, methodology, language that brings people together to create one common truth. And again, that's massively powerful. And who are the beneficiaries? Well, industry, obviously, for all the reasons that you said, and avoiding the pain of trying to satisfy regulators and customers in a currently mysterious area. Regulators, FDA, European regulators, Asian regulators, et cetera, because CAPA matters, it's a good thing. They want to see companies succeed, and this helps them to succeed. And ultimately, and most importantly, patients benefit. We are all here because our core beliefs include the statement that we are here to promote patient welfare using effective methodologies to make safe and effective devices. That is what everybody wants. And this new methodology serves that goal. So let me sit down and give other people a chance to talk, but thank you for your attention.
Steve, just have one question.
Sure.
MakeCAPACool, it's been known. My name is Khaled Musali from Compliance Group.
Hi.
So I've been lucky to come out to the forums, the Case for Quality or the public forum. We all know about it. Every single company today, they have an initiative to revamp their CAPA process.
Right. It's kind of coming on and off.
So really, basically, what I'd like to hear, what is MDIC and the agency is doing to actually promote that concept of MakeCAPACool. I personally talk about it because I love it. I've read through it. I love what Catherine has done, what you have done, and everyone within this organization. However, many of the manufacturers don't know about this program.
I mean, that's exactly. I mean, you're exactly right. The topics that we will be covering today and a critical area of focus going forward is how do we operationalize, right? Because there is, so Jeff Shuren talks a lot, including recently, about the Valley of Death in a different context. But here, I think the Valley of Death is going from where we are now, which is everybody understanding and trying to find their way through the current but ineffective approach to CAPA, to this new approach that offers a potential very successful set of results that companies and others buy into, but it's not built yet, it's not fully socialized, and we need to get there. So we'll be talking about that. Okay, let me wrap up. I'm talking too much. Thanks everybody for your attention. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Let me get the hell out of your way.
Thank you, Steve. I can't believe every one of you who asked questions, I could have pegged you in the audience. Thanks for asking those questions. We were smiling at each other. Those that were on the team were like, we asked those questions. We had those conversations about what is CAPA and what does it mean to you. Anyways, for those of you I haven't met, my name is Catherine Merrill. I am a Global Quality Program Director at Medtronic, but I had the privilege since its beginning of leading the working group for MakeCAPACool. So that has been probably my favorite project since the beginning of my career because of the team. And so I'll go through that in a second. But I will start with this. So this is really all about the CAPA process improvement journey that you guys have been hearing about. And I wanted to start with a quote that basically captures how we felt about it in the beginning, which is, okay, is this really possible given all the history of CAPA and the fact that it is so critical to how things should run within industry and to improvement? And so I can stand here today, say, it did feel impossible until it was done. And now we're wondering, what are we going to do next? So we now know the impossible is possible. So with that, I'll jump in for those of you who are less familiar. It sounds like most of you guys are familiar, but for those who are less familiar, it was born in this room, actually. It's like deja vu for me, based on an industry-wide struggle that we had resulting from that traditional CAPA framework. And so basically, thousands of employees and engineers loved to solve problems, but they did not want a CAPA. And improvements took about years to implement. And so what the team wanted to do was to put the focus back on problem solving and just to help industry improve faster. So basically our main goal was how do we accelerate improvement? And so I can't go on without pausing here and saying this could not have been done without a significantly large number of people. So first, I want to thank MDIC for providing the collaborative environment and all the support for all the working groups. For our FDA team members, you will hear from Blada Vanicki and Marc-Henri Winter later on the panel, who partnered with us for hours, pulling us away from that edge of creating more complexity because we were afraid of an audit finding. And I can't tell you how helpful it was to have them there saying that just because it looks different doesn't mean it won't meet regulations. And so that was really something that allowed the team to stretch and what should this look like. And then also we partnered with consultants as well. And so you'll hear from Emily from McKinsey, who supported us during the design process as well as during the data analysis process for the pilot. And then also for industry, and you can't really see it here, but there were 26 different organizations that were a part of the working group and that had their voice in the framework. And I also want to give a special call out to those that were gutsy enough to try it in the pilot when it hadn't been tried before. And so that would be Illumina, Edwards Life Sciences, Stryker, Illumina, Baxter, Alcon, Abbott, and Celanova. And so again, throughout the whole process, everybody was patient-focused. We were really engaged and optimistic. No, I don't think the "it's not possible" sort of came into our vocabulary. We were very collaborative. People were transparent about what happened at their companies, which is unique. When there's FDA in the room, everybody was open. It took a couple face-to-faces, but pretty soon it was a safe space. Everybody took it really seriously. They asked the hard questions. And this is the part that I really liked. Like, you'd think that they would avoid the landmines, but they pretty much aimed right at them. And then we worked on finding solutions for those. And they were gutsy, and it was a ton of fun to work on. So thank you to the entire team, and you'll get to meet a few of them later. So this was a 5-year program. I don't think it would have taken 5 years if it wasn't for the pandemic. But we had one common purpose: to accelerate improvement, and the goal was to transform the medical device industry and to help our patients. And so we started in 2018. And that was with an iterative design process in order to design the framework. But the cool part is we had our input into the framework was 2 things. The first one was a series of cross-sector interviews like airline, automotive, finance, semiconductor, and then the ex-head of Shingo, which was my favorite with my continuous improvement background. Like, it was really great. We looked at all these different industries that are known for their continuous improvement, and we looked for those themes that we can embed within the framework. And then the second thing we did is we looked for, okay, well, what are the pain points today? And I think some of you guys mentioned these earlier, like when do you have to have corrective action? When is a CAPA required? Or when everything is treated, Robin, I think you said something about the backlog. When everything is treated the same, everything is important, then nothing is, essentially. And so those were some of the pain points we were going after. In 2019, we completed the initial framework, and we developed a pilot plan, and then we published the first white paper, if you guys have seen that. And that actually went through the FDA clearance process as well. And then we had our active pilot phase in 2020 and 2021. And although the pilot was slowed down by the pandemic, it was not stopped. And we were able to develop our white paper, and it went through FDA clearance in 2022, and then it was recently published this year in May. And you'll look at that and you'll say, why did that take you so long to write the white paper? So it should be just easy. Write up the results, publish it, and you're good. But the team really talked about the fact that it was important for us to put together something that was more than a white paper. That's why when you pick it up, it's all in the appendix, but it's really long. And what we knew is they would not have the opportunity to really talk to FDA with all the discussions that we had had. They wouldn't have an opportunity to have all the discussions we had with industry. And so what was going to make them comfortable moving to something that looked so different if they didn't have that? And so what we did is we tried to create like a playbook. Like, if you want to do this, this is some of the information you might want to consider. So we have the CAPA framework, the pilot results, how it aligns with regulations, and then also we spent a lot of time developing compliant examples for the different framework elements, and then best practices. So it's a lot more than just the results of the pilot. Sort of our brain trust in one document. And so this is the framework in a really simplified form. I've learned from past forums, if I stick the actual framework up there that we piloted, it takes forever. So in a simplified level, it's a tiered risk-based approach. It essentially has 2 high-level flows. You can actually flip back and forth between them based on the specific risk of a given event. But at a high level, we have external events, or those that are outside an organization's control, or high-risk trends that are patient or user impacting. They go to what we call an external CAPA, which is like the CAPA you know and love today. It has a lot of people involved. And there's typically a lot more oversight or approvals. It's a standalone CAPA record, typically. And then there's the internal events, those things that happen within an organization's, or they're inside an organization's control, or lower risk trends. And the purpose of this one, these go towards something we call a fast track CAPA, and the goal is to put the main focus on problem solving so we can accelerate that improvement. And there's 3 elements that go into this one that might look different. It can be embedded in the QMS systems where it's found. It has reduced documentation and simplified effectiveness checks. So, and with that, I will jump into the pilot. I have 1 slide on the pilot. So we had 19 sites in the program from 8 different companies. And so in the order of enrollment, so I will acknowledge Edwards joined, I think they got in right before the pandemic. And then there was like a 3 to 4 month lag while the rest of us were getting through that upskill in the pandemic, and then everyone else started to join. So Edwards had 3 sites, Stryker had 6, Medtronic had 3, and then Illumina, Baxter, Alcon, Abbott, and Celanova had 1 or 2. And so that's in the order that everyone enrolled. You will note that a lot of them are medium to large companies, but to the comments we had this morning about extending this for smaller companies, the pilot itself was done at individual sites. So, and those were either slightly over 1,000 people or less than 1,000 people. So essentially, the difference between deploying them at a smaller company and a larger company, we don't see that that would be different. It's just expanding it out. You actually might have more complexity at a large company because you typically have more oversight. But it is something that could be used regardless of size. And then the one little bullet point I have at the bottom, which is about the 100% of these organizations did communicate their intent to roll this out to the rest of their sites after the pilot, which for me really speaks to the success of the pilot more than any of the results that I'm going to show you. Because if you guys know, if it didn't really work and the organization didn't see the improvement they were looking for, it would not be deployed farther than the pilot. So, I mean, I do know a number of them have already deployed across their organizations, and you'll hear from them, some of them today. And I know Medtronic already has. So during this pilot, we refined the framework, we collected the data, we captured lessons learned. It takes about 3 to 6 months to stabilize outside of hypercare, we found. We asked all the hard questions, like I said. We understood the connected QMS elements like trending or risk. And this is, I have a whole slide on this one. This is a really exciting area that the team really put a lot of thought into. We developed compliant examples of the framework elements, and then we embraced the culture change challenges that came up. And then you'll see the pilot site support table here. It's an eye chart, but it's all these eye charts you can't read here are to encourage you to go to the white paper. You'll find it all in the white paper. So you can read it and see it in detail. But the idea is we knew that in order to eliminate variation across different companies, we would need a lot of structure, standardized work, and processes to follow even during the pilot to make sure that we could trust the results. And so we had enrollment and onboarding training. We had audit support. We had a progress check with our FDA team members where they met with each organization to make sure that the way that they had rolled out the concept of the framework met the intent of regulations. Then we had data collection, which were both online and quarterly surveys, and then we had ongoing pilot site support. We met bi-monthly, and then we also had sub-teams as needed. So there was a lot of meetings. But everybody showed up. Like, it's crazy. You say CAPA, and everybody is impassioned one way or the other, and they show up, which is great. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into the good stuff. I have 4 to 5 slides on the results. And so I had to pick my 2 favorite results because I have limited time to speak this morning. And so the 2 I picked is the faster improvement and the fact that the framework it strengthened the connected QMS systems. And so I'll have a slide on each one of those. And so for faster improvement, you'll notice the quote at the top says CAPA timelines from investigation to closure have been reduced by 50% and the issues are not being repeated. So we've actually seen more than that now. And then for stronger connected QMS systems, you'll see we're better understanding our trend thresholds, and it really brought the risk management files to life. It's making the whole QMS stronger. I think that was my favorite quote throughout the whole entire pilot. So this one is for the improvement. So this slide is dedicated to the faster improvement. We had 60% of our pilot CAPAs closed in less than 60 days, and we had quite a pilot population. We had 553, I think it says. And then, so if you look at the top bar chart in the gray, that's our baseline CAPAs, and we did 6 months of CAPAs, and you'll notice the majority of those are above 180 days. I'll show you another chart that they went all the way up to near 400 days and over. The average was almost 400 days, and so they were much higher. And you'll see our pilot CAPAs, 80% of those were fast-track CAPAs, and those were closed in 2 to 3 months. So, and then if you dig down a little bit further, this is another eye chart tempting you to go to the white paper, but this is where you break it down into the average cycle times of each CAPA phase. Because we were interested in how much do you speed up the time between I've identified the issue and I've actually implemented improvements on the floor. And so to do that, we found that external CAPAs, or our classic CAPA, could implement improvements 25% faster. And the expectation is it would be reduced because now you could focus on those more with your resources. And then our fast-track CAPAs were implemented improvements up to 80% faster. So it was a significant shift in the amount of time that it took to actually implement improvements. And then this is my second slide. I love this one because I'm really passionate about the idea that if you build the systems to encourage the behaviors you want, it is self-sustaining. But you could create any kind of procedure, but if it's not going to encourage or reward the behaviors you're looking for, it's like a salmon going upstream. So what we did as a team is we had a lot of discussions when we were building the framework around if we build it this way, what kind of behavior would it reward or encourage? And we were looking to encourage things like increased process monitoring or controls or earlier identification of issues. And so what we did see, and this was great, it's like in my mind I'm thinking, oh, a great plan came together. I mean, you never really know until you pilot it that it's gonna work. And so what we saw is we actually saw that the connected systems of trending, risk management, process controls and monitoring, and early identification issues, we saw an impact in all of those. And so one of the examples would be trending. And so if you are going to have full use of the fast-track CAPA process, like you could use it even without this, but if you want to take full advantage for what it will give you, you need to make sure that you have a defined trending process with established action limits. And so it will naturally, when you implement it, it'll be like, man, if if I had a really good trending process and action limits, I could pull in more of the benefit of the fast track CAPA. So it will ask you to do those improvements, which is great. And then and you can see that in the quote here that says, hey, the framework really helped prioritize the trending conversation. And then the second one was risk management that I'll highlight. And for that one, you need to make sure that you have up-to-date risk management files and they're easily accessible for users. And so the second quote on here is, we're working on making the risk documentation more accessible by everyone. And then as far as the earlier identification of issues, that's the third quote. Oh, actually, that's on I think the previous page. Did I have it on the previous page? There it is. Okay, so go to the third quote on there. It says, we're opening more CAPAs proactively where we haven't in the past. People see they can make improvements and fast track CAPA is opened. So that really reflects that comment down at the bottom. The reward system is a powerful driver of behavior and therefore culture. So this is the last slide. I should have made it first because this is what everybody is thinking. We're going to do a new way of doing CAPA. What are our auditors going to think? And so obviously throughout the process, we monitored this pretty heavily. We had 32 audits during the length of the pilot, no findings associated with the new CAPA framework. We had 19 external audits, so we had MD-SAP auditors, TUV, DECRA, and BSI, as well as 2 from FDA, and that was towards the end of the pandemic, and then we had 13 internal audits. And so we really do think this reflects the detailed orientation that our FDA team members had around making sure that, and the rest of the experts on the team for CAPA, making sure that it met the 820 requirements for CAPA as well as ISO 13485. And then I know Marc Henry was able to work with the global regulators as well. He met with them a number of times during the pilot, and you'll get to hear about that on the panel. And just in case you don't believe me, I have included the quotes. So some of them said, MD-SAP auditors really like the continuous monitoring associated with the fast-track CAPA effectiveness check. And then auditors like the faster turnaround time of the fast-track CAPA. And then it was advantageous to see every problem as unique coming into the framework. It was a gold star in their mind. I'm thinking, oh, a gold star, this is great. So we didn't have, I heard of no auditor that said, this is horrible. We got really positive feedback from both global regulators as well as FDA. And I have one more slide. There we go. And this is the quote that I'll leave you, which is, it's kind of fun now that we're done to do the impossible. And now I'm like, I need to do another one somewhere. The team keeps saying, okay, what's next? Yeah. So if you guys want to join the fun, there are 2 ways you can do this. You can begin your own journey on the MakeCAPACool sort of transformation if it's industry within their own organization. I have linked you to the white paper link here in the presentation, as well as I'm here to extend an invitation to you. Another person who said this, now what are you going to do? I think Steve said, what are you going to do about expanding it or socializing it broader? Well, MDIC is already thinking about that. And if you want to join them on that part of the journey, please contact Paul Sumner and he will get you connected. They're going to be looking at global socialization, adoption, and implementation, as well as to develop additional materials that can help organizations beyond the white paper who want to do the transformation. So like training modules, videos, and workshops. So with that, I'll invite the panel to come up here. And all the questions you guys have for me, you can ask the panel. Okay.
Go in any order. I have no idea because I don't know if I'm on the panel. I think there's an open chair.
This is so great for us because it's like the gang is all here. Like we haven't been in the same room with each other in like 2 years or something like that. So
Fighting who's going to sit where.
I know.
So enough chairs? I mean, this is a huge panel.
Yeah, that's good.
I think we're good.
Yeah. So I get to moderate this panel, and I get the lucky job of introducing everyone, and so I will do the introductions, and then guys, if I have missed anything, please add to it, okay? So first, I've got Marc-Henri Winter at the end. He is a program analyst at FDA who acted as the team's subject matter expert for ISO. So we really appreciated his voice on the team. He was involved in INDISAP as a subject matter expert and in ISO TC210, the working group 1 that developed ISO 13485. He also has prior experience as a third-party auditor to ISO 13485, the European, Canadian, Japanese, and US regulations. So he was the perfect person to be on the team. And then next to him is Bleda Vunicki, who is a policy analyst at CDRH, but she is our resident Case for Quality team lead who keeps us all in line. Yep. And then Denise Nazario is a director of quality systems at Stryker. She's worked at Stryker for 27 years in different roles across quality and ops and has been their global process owner for CAPA since 2016. And then Dan Beener, the vice president of quality at Edwards. Do you have any other introduction you want to add to that?
Nope, that's good.
Okay. He was the first pilot in the program. So he essentially was our pathfinder. So we'd be like, Dan. He'd say, this is what happened. We're all going to have to worry about this. And technically, we did. We had to adapt. So we got to adapt based on all his learnings. So thanks. Ours went smoother. Okay. And then Steve is president of the Silverman Group. You've met him. And so a consultancy that serves medical product companies on regulatory strategy and policy issues. Steve's professional experience includes nearly 2 decades in federal service with extensive time in senior FDA roles. At FDA, Steve directed the CDRH Office of Compliance, where he led device quality initiatives, engaged Congress and the press, and guided the office's reorganization. And then Emily Simon from the McKinsey Group. She's an engagement manager, and she was my partner in crime when it came to data analysis. So you can imagine when we're all providing our CAPA data, how critical it is that you have someone who is neutral and can anonymize all the data so that we can now look at it. So we sent all our data to her, and she scrubbed it, which is great. So with that, I have a series of 8 questions. And so I was going to start out asking these questions. Anyone can answer them except for number 3. I'll tell you ahead of time that people are going to want to hear from Marc-Henri and Bleda. But everything else, if you guys have questions, how's it going to run? They're going to go to...
Yeah, for the audience, there's a microphone back there.
Okay.
And then virtually, if they could enter the Zoom chat with their questions.
Okay.
And we will feed them into that beautiful monitor right in front of the panel.
Okay, so for those of you who are virtual and didn't hear that, if you want to ask a question, put it in chat, and they will make sure they answer it. Okay. So with that, I will start out with the first question, and you guys can always interrupt these questions. We don't have to ask all 8 first. Okay. So what would you say are the biggest differences between the traditional one-size-fits-all CAPA process and the risk-based framework developed by MDIC's working group?
I can start.
Okay.
Go for it.
So I'd like to say that there isn't a big difference in terms of regulatory requirements. The agency has always communicated that problems should be solved commensurate with risk, which is essentially what the CAPA framework addresses. It is a way of implementing a risk-based framework. And so in terms of regulatory requirements, they are very alike. You've mentioned earlier that I think one thing that we learned during the pilot is the fact that there's a need to have mature trending and risk management processes in order for a risk-based framework to be successful. And I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said something, Bleda, there that I think really struck true, that idea that the industry guidance has always been that the approach to CAPA is commensurate with the complexity or the risk level of the problem. And to me, this was like, okay, let's put our money where our mouth is, and are we serious about that? And yeah, that was a big takeaway for us as we started implementing this, was that you can take a kind of a tiered approach, and you can focus more on the really complex things and put your, put these more sophisticated tools to work on the more complex problems. And on the more straightforward problems, deal with them in a more straightforward manner. And that's okay. And that allows you to make more simple improvements, more incremental improvements, and do those in a little bit more expedited fashion, and just work through the issue.
And just to expand on that, with the two pathways in the framework, essentially what you're seeing as being different is the depth at which you would go into your root cause analysis, and with the fast track CAPAs, you're willing to iterate in order to drive faster continuous improvement and results. So you're looking at incremental results over time, whereas with a higher risk issue, you really want to get your hands on all of the root causes, addressing all of the root causes so the issue does not recur. And that obviously takes a different, maybe a different level of resources. With the faster track CAPAs, you can leverage subject matter experts or process owners, kind of take their word for it based on their experience and their knowledge, and take a stab at resolving a portion of the issue, while with a higher risk CAPA, you would put together a multifunctional team to really drive in-depth root cause analysis. And then on the back end, it's the effectiveness checks that you alluded to earlier, Catherine, around just leveraging our ongoing metrics and analytics to determine whether or not we've been effective. Whereas with some of our higher risk issues, we want to be a little more thorough. We do targeted effectiveness checks and such. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But from a regulatory perspective, the rigor is absolutely the same.
Yeah. And I did want to mention, Denise actually had the largest number of sites in the pilot. Not only that, they implemented them faster. So they have a trick somewhere. Okay, it was great. Okay, so anybody have anything else they want to answer on that one? Okay, our next one is, how does the risk-based CAPA framework better address the resource-intensive aspects commonly associated with the more traditional CAPA process?
So I guess I kind of already touched on that a little bit. So again, the higher risk ones are ones where you really want to make sure that the issue does not recur. I mean, there's an expectation that we're thorough, and that we're not just looking at scoping these CAPAs narrow, which might lead to the issue coming up in another area of the business or on another production line. So you really want to be mindful of scoping these adequately and ensuring that you have a thorough investigation, and that might entail pulling together a lot more resources, multifunctional people from different areas to weigh in on not only the root causing, but the solutions as well. You want robust solutions to be put in place.
Yeah, and that also then brings back in that question of your risk analysis and your ability to determine what are the high risk situations, what are the lower risk situations. And if you can make a good determination there, then it gets a lot easier to then also make a decision about where you do need to spend your time. Those lower risk situations, those are the places where you can take more straightforward actions, where you can take a more incremental improvement approach. And then use the rest of your quality system as a means of then continuously monitoring to make sure that your actions are effective.
Yeah. Catherine, I think we have a virtual.
Oh, we have virtual.
Question,
we have questions from the virtual audience. Okay. Okay, I'd like to understand the timing metrics other companies have put in place for fast track versus traditional CAPAs. Additionally, are there any companies evaluating fast track for their SCAR programs? So let's start with the first one. The timing metrics other companies have put in place for fast track.
So I can speak for my organization. We look at aging as one of our metrics, and we've been hesitant to put a specific target on fast track versus standard, because something that drives the age of a CAPA is not only whether it's high risk or low risk, it's also the complexity. And a lot of times, and we had this discussion a lot when we were building the framework, was high risk and low risk were not synonymous to high complexity, low complexity. So for us, what's important is looking at due date attainment. So once we commit to due dates, whether it's a fast track CAPA or a traditional CAPA, we're looking at due dates and making sure that extensions are only applied where appropriate. Again, it's always looking to take action without undue delay.
If I could also add, so from the regulatory perspective, Mark Hundred and I had the opportunity to what you would say pre-audit or audit, perform a virtual audit of all the sites that implemented the framework. So we had an opportunity to see the framework or the systems that were established within all the sites that were part of the pilot, at least I think the first 10. In occasion, we did see a time frame that sites had implemented. I think it was 30 days, if I recall correctly. And I guess the only thing that I would add is ensuring that the process is fluid and agile in order for you to adapt. Putting a time frame in place may not allow for that fluidity to occur. And so if you're thinking about adding metrics or time frames within the system, just consider how you can shift from potentially a fast track to a traditional in order to implement improvements faster to drive towards that high quality, which is essentially what the goal of the entire pilot was.
Yeah, we were one of those companies that that did have that timeline kind of baked into how we intended to execute the system, and the primary reason for that was because we also had the intent that we were going to completely embed a fast track CAPA within the subsystem where it was occurring, and for us at a manufacturing site, that's predominantly going to be within our NCR system. So there are timeliness metrics, associated with NCRs, that we have established internally as a company, and we intended to, keep the execution of a fast track CAPA, kind of within those same timeframes. That did present some challenges, but on the other hand, it also did tend to give us a kind of a right size frame of mind as to what was going to fit within a fast track CAPA and what was something that was going to be more complex and that we would need to take a more holistic or traditional CAPA approach to.
I find it really interesting that this is sort of a topic that we had a lot as a team. I know I'm not on the panel, but is the concept of there's more than one way to be compliant. So you'll notice even when you read the white paper, they have a high-level view of the framework, and we put a lot of time into the second one you'll see, which is more like the global intent of the framework, where it gives you the main elements of it. And then we have the more complex one, the way we decided to implement it as a team so that we would all implement the same one during the pilot. But depending on sort of the behavior you want to drive within your organization and how you want to manage it, there are multiple ways to implement a risk-based approach. So, yeah. Anything anybody want to? Oh yeah, the second question we actually talked about as a team. So I'm wondering if you all want to talk to it. Okay, are there any companies evaluating fast track for their SCAR programs, their supplier CAPA programs?
So we actually do. There's no distinction between the internal and the external. only that there's a supplier quality team that would be documenting on behalf of the supplier, but we follow the same exact two pathways. We have fast track CAPAs for suppliers, and we have standard or traditional CAPAs for suppliers as well.
And we talked through the different, in the white paper, we did speak to the different considerations or best practices you would need to consider if you were going to implement that. Yep. But it wasn't a part of the pilot. Okay.
Catherine, I think we have a few questions.
Oh, hey, George, sorry.
No, hey,
Go for
Catherine.
it.
It's kind of amazing to be in the same room with you again after like 4.5 years. Good to see you all. Congratulations on the white paper. I know Lou Ann Pendy would be really proud. Maybe she's dialed in right now. Hopefully not. She's hopefully enjoying retirement. But congrats on that. And she was the one who came up with the term MakeCAPACool. So kudos to all of you on it. I'm really curious as to, when I looked at the white paper, I think I did a control F on it. And I think risk is in the white paper over 200 times, maybe over 250 times. And it seems to me that the organizations that you had participate in the pilot were already ready to jump into this water, however deep it may be, and look for solutions. But what I see is a struggle for many organizations in adopting MakeCAPACool, or dare I even say, the CSA white paper, which is also very much about risk from an approach perspective, is that cultural change to do that risk analysis, right? It's actually easier for them just to treat all CAPAs the same, or to treat all validations the same. So, and I think your pilot audience was very willing to engage in looking at this from a different risk perspective. I'm curious as to what do you do to help invoke that culture change for organizations to break from just everything's one big black box and instead get to some of that risk-based thinking? Thanks.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely about honing in on what the benefits are for the business. There's a lot of business value in taking a risk-based approach. The first being your resources and being able to dedicate resources where it makes sense. Resolving the high-risk issues faster and more robustly so that they don't recur. That has a definite impact on your customers, which in turn will increase business revenue in the long run. I just think it's a matter of selling the business benefits associated to it.
Yeah, I would add to that, it is along the same lines, the business benefits, but the benefits of, how you can operate as an organization. CAPA is not the only place where we have gotten the instruction that, the actions we should take should be commensurate with the risk level of the issue that's going on. That kind of mindset is pervasive throughout all of the quality system management aspects of our industry. So the idea of taking a little bit of time to make sure that you have a robust risk analysis process is going to pay off in multiple facets of how you operate your organization.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's also worth recognizing that there are going to be firms that, no matter the demonstrated success of this initiative, are going to adhere to the standard, more cumbersome, but more familiar traditional approach, right? And so the objective is not to change the mind of everybody in industry and all regulators. I think that would be great if we could get to that result, but it's probably not realistic. I think there's a real opportunity here to make a demonstrated empirical case that will drive industry leaders and industry members who may have less familiarity with quality system regulatory requirements as to actionable strategies that improve their operations. That kind of success then complemented with fewer scary stories of very critical quality events, which can be catastrophic, will have an impact on industry operations because the approach that's being proposed is lower risk, less expensive in many instances, regulator endorsed, and so there's a very strong compelling case for implementing this initiative even where previous more by the numbers but less nuanced approaches are effective.
Yeah, and I'll add to that to say I think it's a bit of a journey in time. So maybe some organizations that we see maybe coming out of 483s kind of swing to that direction of being a bit more on the conservative side, treating everything as high risk. And I think it's more of time than organizations just never being ready to feel comfortable and be ready to move to the next step to take something more risk-based and tiered. And I think the importance of what I've seen here is, there's something to look towards in the future, even if an organization isn't ready to make that step now, to say, maybe in 5, even more years down the line, we'll get there as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark Henry.
Just one of the figures that Catherine mentioned earlier struck me is the idea that with this model, there are more CAPA initiated. So why is that? Is that because there were less problems before and now suddenly we find them? Or they were there, but we didn't want to put them in the system, and then how was they handled? And so that's where we slip out of compliance. And that's where, regulatory speaking, we are in trouble. So I think the benefit is huge. I mean, from the industry perspective, making sure that the problems are being resolved, are being taken care of by the firm, and then and get it's not a jail-free card, but actually pass compliance tests appropriately. So I don't think there is more.
Yeah, if I can add one more thing to your question, George, I think what we also learned is that previously there was this check the box that we reviewed the risk assessment. So we checked the box that we did that versus actually implementing and leveraging the risk assessment process as part of your CAPA process, which was the biggest difference that was implemented as part of the MakeCAPAcool framework. I think with that, it helped asking the questions of, is this, was there an impact to patient and providers or patients and users? And then evaluating or looking back at the risk assessment, whether the risk was acceptable or unacceptable, and how to drive the next steps within the process. The team spent a lot of time on the risk process itself, including compliance risk, which really led to a lot of discussions within the team of how do we actually handle that, because not everyone has developed what the team called a compliance risk assessment, and it's actually, and I believe, part of the appendix within the white paper. So there was a lot of discussion of the different types of risk and how to treat the different risks that may be apparent as you implement the MakeCAPAcool process.
Yeah, Blade makes a good point. We knew this would be a struggle for organizations, and so the discussions that we had as we were working to implement it, we captured in the appendix of the white paper with examples. And then to Marc Henry's point about some organizations, if they're now making their decision on risk during the pilot, we saw some organizations have less CAPAs, and we have some organizations have more CAPAs, depending on the site. And they basically learned, wait a minute, when we look at the risk, this actually is a higher risk than we realize. This requires corrective action. And others maybe had less if they were throwing everything into that CAPA system versus focusing on those higher risk issues. So it really depends on the organization. So with that one, I'm going to get to question 3. Oh, go ahead.
No, I don't. Yeah, just a quick question. So the CAPA framework, I wanted to get the insights from the panel, relies quite a bit and places an emphasis on the measuring and monitoring aspect of a particular organization. And I'm just curious what challenges you faced in trying to make sure that was well connected, and what guidance you have to other industry members as they look at deploying a risk-based CAPA and thinking about that element of the risk-based framework.
Maybe you want to speak to the continuous effectiveness check?
Yeah, I'd say what's one of the important things before getting into implementing the framework is making sure that all of your input sources, the way you look at that data is defined, that you're using statistically based analysis where appropriate. Not everything needs to be statistically based. But you know, some areas are a little bit tougher to manage that way. But it's really looking across your input sources. If you're looking at complaints, you're looking at audits, you're looking at manufacturing data, scrap, machine uptime, preventive maintenance, corrective maintenance, all of those things. How do you look at your data? What is the frequency with which you look at the data? And then establishing the thresholds that will drive action or decision making or escalation. That to me is the key part. It's not an easy task. You might have to take a scaled approach, again, risk-based. So looking at your complaints, looking at external data, more than the internal, but eventually moving upstream and looking at the internal is what eventually will drive the proactive nature of this process.
Yeah. Fundamentally, if you're going to use the CAPA framework to make a decision that is going to tell you, we don't think we need to take corrective action at this point in time, and your conclusion then is, okay, we're going to continue to measure and monitor, you better make sure that you actually are measuring and monitoring that thing that you just said you're going to measure and monitor. So the applicability of the CAPA framework then becomes constrained to how many things are you willing to measure and monitor. And the more things that you're willing to measure and monitor, the more things you can apply this risk-based approach to. And then as well as the more things you measure and monitor, the more things that you'll be able to actually tell whether there's something bad going on. And that's a good thing. As Catherine had mentioned before, that's one of the things that we were actually steering ourselves toward, is to encourage a more robust, and not just a larger, but a more robust, more logic-based measuring and monitoring process, for the sites that we were exercising this in.
Yep. Okay.
Good morning. I'm Jonna Turner from LifeNet Health. I wanted to circle back to the conversation related to business benefit. As you're working with an organization that may work more on the conservative side, as you're trying to encourage others that may be outside of quality to move to something different, I was wondering if any of you, as part of the pilot or as part of this process, had any occasion to quantify the cost of a CAPA. It seems to be pretty difficult to do that, and just wonder what approach you may have taken if you did that.
Really quickly, I can say that we have in the past made attempts to just quantify the number of man hours essentially dedicated to executing a CAPA, and that's not just the man hours of the CAPA owner, but the administrative support that goes around maintaining your CAPA system, as well as the additional hours of time to, say, run confirmation studies if you're trying to nail down a root cause. The time that was associated with bringing a group of 10 people together to do a brainstorming session. All of those kinds of things. And you'd be surprised, it adds up pretty quickly. And so to contrast that with the time associated with executing a more straightforward fast-track CAPA,
you'll see a pretty good distinction there.
I think that you raise a really important point. I think that it kind of relates to some of the topics that we've discussed already and other topics that this group and others need to discuss as we go forward, right? Which is, it's basically this. There's a tremendous amount of depth around the MakeCAPACool initiative. There's already been a tremendous amount of substantive work and people with a great deal of expertise who understand what are the issues that need to be addressed as we go forward. I think that one critical question, I think that this relates to your point, is how do we expand the initiative so that we have an audience that consists more than a group of smart, interested individuals who understand the basic concepts and support the effort as it goes forward, but create a larger audience of people who are representing firms who are not present today, right? Who are convinced that this initiative offers a pathway to address business needs like lowering cost of compliance. So providing some kinds of empirical statistics that demonstrate that the efficacy of this initiative reduces the cost of compliance activities, reduces the risk of regulatory citations, reduces the risks of bad patient outcomes, right? So that in the enormous sea of individuals who are ready to advise firms about how to do CAPA better, this initiative can be identified as a well-supported, empirical, well-documented initiative that produces positive results. Setting this initiative up to communicate those messages more broadly, I think is absolutely critical.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're at number 3.
3 of 8.
3 of 8. I said we probably won't get through all 8. Otherwise, we'd be here till lunch. Okay, so this one is about the regulatory alignment piece. So how did the working group ensure that the new CAPA framework is aligned with regulations, both CFR 82100 and 13485? I'm looking at the end of this panel right now.
You can get us started.
I can get started. Yeah, that was interesting to me when I joined the group. I didn't join right at the beginning, just a bit later, to realize that there was clearly a fear of getting out of compliance by this effort. And so even though the people around the table were expert at least as much as I was about CAPA, so I thought that was very interesting. And so part of the effort was to go back to the fundamentals. What does the regulation say? But also, what does the preamble tells about that regulation that gives the spirit of it? And that's where the notion of risk-based approach is really spelled out. So my background is as much international and was than as domestic. I've been an auditor before, and so and I've been an auditor in Europe, I have to say. And in Europe, a lot of companies are not so much focused on the US regulation, and so they didn't seem to have that problem of thinking with a risk-based approach. Also, ISO 13485 that had been revised in 2016 had this new requirement. Actually, it's part of the requirement to have a risk-based process. So it was interesting that it seemed to be a very US-centered problem. And I wouldn't say why or what, but certainly one of the observations we can make is if you look at all the 483 observations issued by the FDA, a very large share of it is against the CAPA system. And so it's probably understandable that the industry reacted by making sure that this was super square. but Super Square make it not very flexible, and that was part of the concern, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would add to that, we also presented at the MDSAP forums on the MakeCAPACool initiative. And what was interesting that pretty much all the regulators in the room said, well, this is what we expect. This is what we actually see. So this is not different from what we currently see today. So I guess to more even further confirm what Mark Henry just said is that that is also what we heard from the other regulators. It's the agency's expectation to adapt a risk-based approach to the entire quality management system, as it was mentioned earlier, but in addition to CAPA, since we're talking about it right now. I think what's going to be really important for organizations as they implement a risk-based approach is identifying a process that fits their organization. It may be something very similar to the MakeCAPACool process, but it may also look different within other organizations. And it's really going to be dependent on the maturity of the subsystems that are in place. As we've mentioned a couple times now, that the monitoring as well as having a robust risk management system is key in order to be successful in implementing a risk-based approach. So when you hear the fear, as Mark Henry mentioned, or as we saw as part of the working group, that was really based on, well, we don't want to be questioned whether the risk that we identified here is inappropriate or in disagreement with the regulator. And so having to go back to say, but fast track is CAPA and external CAPA is CAPA. So you're meeting regulatory requirements. You're just allowing yourself to utilize the other subsystems that you have in place in order to drive improvements and also investigations. And so I think I would say that every organization needs to further evaluate their systems before implementing a risk-based approach.
Yep.
So is it okay? I'd like to make one quick point. I'm not a regulator, but I used to be. Look, I completely agree with Mark Henry's and Blada's points. I think that one really, really critical challenge going forward is to make sure that there is uniform communication to regulators. So if you look at FDA, for example, there is CDRH, the Device Center, and there is, I think, a very, very clear view of this initiative, why this initiative is beneficial, and how it basically fits within current regulatory standards. The question then becomes, when a firm headquartered in Missouri is evaluated for quality system compliance by an FDA investigator who is located in Kansas, for example, who may not have actually heard about the MakeCAPACool initiative, how do you position that firm to efficiently communicate to that FDA investigator, yes, this is completely consistent with FDA compliance. And even though you are responsible in every quality system inspection that you do for determining whether or not CAPA is satisfied, this does it, right? And so that kind of comprehensive communication, not just within FDA, but MDSAP and elsewhere, so that there is a shared comprehensive understanding that MakeCAPACool actually is a really, really effective tool to meet current regulatory requirements is essential. My own perspective is that I don't think we're there yet, but we also know that it's something that absolutely has to be done. But if you all have a different view, for sure, I think it's critical to hear about.
I will put in a plug for the white paper because
that's what I was going to say.
About that extensively. Traditionally, even QSID has a question to evaluate CAPA commensurate or ensuring that problems are being solved commensurate with the risk.
Right.
And so I think when you talk about investigators in the field that audit CAPA, that is an understanding throughout, I will say, FDA, that problems should be solved commensurate with risk. And I would say read the white paper further to further understand the conversations and the discussions we had as part of the team of exactly doing that. How do you actually have the discussions and the conversations with the regulators to explain the implementation of the CAPA system utilizing the risk-based approach?
And to that.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think we did a phenomenal job during the pilots in creating communication that could be leveraged by the sites that were piloting the work frame to educate the inspectors, the auditors that were coming in, be upfront about the fact that we were piloting this initiative. And it was very well received. So, pointing them to the original white paper, and including, I think there was a link to
a memo.
I'm sorry.
Training. We had
we had some training material for them. I think all of that did really well to be transparent and raise that visibility about what we were doing and why we were doing it.
I think it's great that the tools are in place. I think that there needs to be a mechanism to position firms very easily and efficiently to leverage those tools when they are talking to investigators or others about how they have modified their quality practices in this area.
And that speaks to phase 2 of MakeCAPACool, that you are all encouraged to join.
Just to add maybe to Steve's point is, why are we doing things the way we do it? And one first reason is because we were taught to do it a particular way, and you mentioned the training organization, the consultancy in the field, that talking about CAPA is kind of always, you have to do this and do this and do this. And it's not so much a modulated approach. And the other element might be also the infrastructure you're working on mostly. And I'm thinking if you are an organization who buys an IT system to handle the CAPA system, if the CAPA system is a one-size-fits-all, then you don't have that ability to maybe have a risk-based approach just because of the tool you're using. And that's unfortunate. And so that's probably more towards that direction at this time that I would focus the effort towards to change the culture.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, we have 2 questions from the virtual audience. So how much variation, so they're talking about the pilot sites in MakeCAPACool. How much variation has there been in the approaches of these companies? Have they been able to take similar approaches, or has it varied based on their individual quality management systems? What were their biggest factors in success? So that's almost 2 questions. So as far as variation, did you guys want to speak to that?
So I'll speak to when we planned our pilot, we obviously were not the first ones in, and that was deliberate because, one, we wanted to learn from, capitalize off early learnings, and second, we're a big company and we wanted to make sure that we had representation. So one, we were looking, 2 of our 8 divisions were involved, 6 of our 44 manufacturing sites were involved. 50% were US-based, 50% were European-based. And I was trying to get a mix, right, to make sure that we had the variation necessary to gauge the success of the framework in our organization. I think the one thing that might be different from other organizations, we already had a global system, a global process. So both the procedures and the e-systems were standardized across Stryker, which made it a lot easier. But there's always nuances at the sites and in how the CAPA process connects to the other QMS elements, and that's where we saw variability. And in some places, sites were more mature with their data. At other sites, not so much, and the same with risk management files. Some leverage them very well, others not so much, and there wasn't that availability or easily visible, or ease of visibility to the risk documents in order to execute the framework. So there were variances, but I'd say it's all about piloting it and figuring out what works best and where people are in the process, so that you can plan for a better implementation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that any two medical device companies have exactly the same quality management system. Of course, we're going to have a lot of things that are similar and some things that are different. And sometimes those nuances become really important in a pilot program. And to the same point that Denise made, even within our own company, the different sites that we had different methodologies in place, particularly when it came to things like measuring and monitoring, how they were executing those, to what degree those things had been developed. The risk management also, if you're talking about legacy devices versus newly developed devices where, the team that was working on those devices had the opportunity to learn what parts of risk management or risk analysis made sense for the previous devices and learning lessons to make those things make more sense as the company evolves and as that system further develops. That makes a difference in how easily the risk-based CAPA process can be adopted. So all of those factors are going to play a role in how this CAPA framework can be implemented.
So similar to what Denise said at Stryker, where they selected sites that would sort of build that variation in that would be representative of the organization, Medtronic did something very similar. So I know within the pilot, we were very structured about making sure that the framework that we selected that's reflected in the white paper was implemented as is into the organization. But like both of them said, there's differences within an organization that will add that variability. We wanted that because if you pilot it at all the different sites, you can identify what would be the best. And so we learned from that to identify what would be the most effective so that we could roll that out. So we did have variation, but within the framework and how we met that intent of the risk-based framework, we tried to stay really consistent to that. So, okay, we have. Anybody else have anything else? We have 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Yes.
Yeah, very briefly, working with a CMO, Chief Medical Officer in Medical Affairs at certain companies, they felt very isolated from the CAPA process and felt that people who were unqualified to do a risk assessment with respect to patient safety and well-being were just creating the decision trees and actually doing the analyses. Did your group take into account CMO and medical affairs as part of your structure?
We talked a lot about the risk-based approach and how an organization, what would have to be in that decision. So that's in the appendix of the white paper, but I think it would be unique based on the organization as to who they would need to contact. But I don't know if you guys want to make a comment to that.
If I can just comment on that. So we didn't focus as much of ensuring how mature a risk management system is at the site, which, as you're mentioning, everyone has their process of identifying risk associated with failures and issues, the hazards. So what we focused on is how do you leverage those records and those documents as part of your system. And so I don't think, at least to my knowledge from the conversations, that didn't really come up as much, just because we mostly stayed away from developing a effective risk management system. We felt that is a subgroup on its own that MDIC can initiate and focus on.
It's kind of a black box in our model.
Thank you.
So, Cisco Vicente, just for everybody online. Just a quick comment to something before, because I think it leads into the question, right? When we were discussing the, the potential to get the word out for the investigators. And I think the benefit that I've seen and the beauty of the CAPA framework is that our investigators, they're very good about risk, right? They understand that, and you start the conversation this way, and I think that's what this framework enables. You start the conversation this way, they get it. They kind of adopt and accept. They just want to know that you understand it, and you could demonstrate that you're in control. So, it was talked about in terms of how do we get the message out. Cal had also brought it up a little earlier about how do we get more of this going. Obviously, the easy one, the most comfortable one people are aware of is just policy, right? That we put it into guidance. Not the easiest one to get through, and it has a different effect, right? It tends to lock things into what that perspective is. And Catherine, you mentioned beforehand, there's lots of ways to meet that requirement. And there's nothing that says it can't get better as time evolves. Mm-hmm. So, and maybe to feed the discussions for later, but you guys and your experience, are there thoughts as to how we can get the word out without necessarily thinking about driving into that guidance solution?
More T-shirts.
Well, maybe I'll start, Cisco, and I'd love for others to jump in. I don't, in my opinion, I don't think a guidance is necessary or it's needed, right? Because in terms of how the policy has been structured in the past or how it's going to look in the future is really going to be with the risk-based mindset in mind. But how do we shift the culture within industry to allow them to adapt a risk-based mindset? I think it's going to be up to the leaders, similar to Edward, Stryker, Medtronic, to continue communicating the benefits that they're seeing internal to the organization so others can buy in. I think that's how Case for Quality VIP even started, is word of mouth, but also just continue to communicate as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you. I think we as industry members need to hold ourselves accountable to making that clear to our regulators that this is a benefit to the organization and to our customers as well. And as much as we can, be upfront, make it visible, and when we're presenting our CAPA systems, just help educate the regulators in what we've done to transform it. And
yeah, I mean, if I can just echo very quickly, and apologies, I know we're past time. If I can just echo Catherine's request for participation, this is arguably the most important challenge that we will face as we make this initiative take hold on a broad basis. Who are the people that we need to reach through broad communication, and how best do we reach them? And speaking for myself, just rub my stomach because it's comfortable. I have ideas, but I have absolutely no clue whether or not they are the right ideas. You all, and there's a plus for folks online as well, you live with this stuff. So please give us the benefit of your experience and perspectives.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank all the panel members for the great answers and for everybody who asked questions in the room. I know we're being told that our time is up. So if you guys do have questions and breaks, we'll be here for the next couple of days. And we just thanks for your participation.
Thank you.